Hi, it's Princess and welcome to my Sims editing tips video. So this is going to just be some simple tips that I recommend when using a mouse and keyboard, because mouse and keyboard is where I started off first. Yes, I do have a drawing tablet, but majority of people just edit their sim screenshots with a mouse and keyboard when they are starting up, and they can look fabulous. You don't need a drawing tablet for your edits to look amazing. I think you can do an awesome job with the mouse and keyboard. So I'm going to show you guys a few of my techniques that I used when I started up. But first, I just want to recommend LanaCC Finds, because in her all tags Sims 4cc, she does have a section that is like dedicated to editing sim screenshots and stuff. So in the miscellaneous section down here, she has lots of great Photoshop add-ons that you can put on your sim screenshots and stuff. I always use the fonts and the gradients. I think they're amazing. She has lots of light leaks and stuff. It is great. So check out LanaCC Finds if you do want to add some amazing like extras to your photo or to your screenshot. So today we're going to be playing around with this sim right here. So there will be a PNG of this sim. It's going to look exactly like this. It's going to be in the description. It's going to come like this with a transparent background. And I just put this yellow background that I found on LanaCC Finds because I thought it was really nice and bright and pretty. Okay, so even though the sim has a transparent background, usually when I cut out the background of my sims, I get a lot of like white that's usually behind the sim, that's behind the hair and stuff, because of my create a sim background. So there are two different methods to get rid of this white outline that she has, and the first method is just using the eraser tool right over here. So we're going to click on that eraser tool. The size of my brush is actually very good right now, but if you do want to change it, you press right click and then you can change the size like so. But usually I like to keep it pretty small because I like to be more accurate with how I'm deleting all of this white background. So let's start up here where the white is pretty crazy. I also recommend when you are taking away all this white, you know, you have to of course have a steady hand, go slow with it. It is a little bit tedious and everything, but if you do make a little mistake like I just did right there, then you can take a step back by doing Control Z, which is also why I recommend by taking your hand off of left click often, because there will be times where you do mess up and you don't want to do this whole hair, mess up down here and then have to undo the whole thing. So I definitely recommend that you take your hand off of right click often. But let's just say if you make a couple of mistakes like this, you know, well obviously you're not going to do that, but a couple of mistakes, you want to go a few steps back, you're going to hold Control Alt Z and then keep pressing Z to go back. You know, Control Z is one step back, but Control Alt Z, you can go back multiple steps. So that's what I like about that. So that's one way to do it. The eraser is pretty good. I use this for my drawing tablet, but another method that I recommend, if you don't want to keep backtracking like that, if you don't want to keep Control Z-ing like that, I recommend you using a layer mask. So you need to make sure that you have the sim layer selected, and then click this little tool down here, which is the layer mask, and then make sure you have the layer mask selected right over here. So the reason why I like using the layer mask is because of instead of undoing all the mistakes that you may have just done, you can just paint them back on. So when the white is in the foreground and the black is in the background, just like that, you are erasing what is on her face. But when you switch the colors with this arrow right here, and make the white or make the black in the foreground and then the white in the background, you can paint on what you just erased. So instead of going and pressing Control Z, you can just paint on your mistakes that you may have made, which is what I usually liked doing instead of using the eraser. So yeah, you could just go down, go down, go down, go down. Say if you make it, you know, a little too thin or something like that, you can reshape it, make it look a little nicer like that. And then it, you know, you could be a little more a little more just like faster, I guess, with the layer mask instead of using the eraser. And yeah, so I'm going to erase the rest of the white part around her face and body, and then we can move on to my next tip. Okay, so now we finally removed all of the white from around her body. So once you've done that, and if you have been using the layer mask, what you can do is right click on this layer mask right here and do apply layer mask, and it will become one layer once again. So yeah, there you go. There is the clean, fresh sim. So next we're gonna fix any clipping that the sim might have on them. So for this sim right here, it is her arm. Her arm is looking a little bit awkward down here. So I'm just gonna zoom into that. And to zoom in, I'm not sure if I already went through this, but you have to hold down Alt and then scroll in, and then you can zoom in right there. So yeah, her arm is looking a little bit awkward. So we're just going to fix that up really quickly. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new layer, make sure that layer is selected, and then we're going to click on this brush tool right here. So I'm going to keep this brush tool fairly small. We can zoom in a little bit more. I'm going to keep this brush tool pretty small because we want to be pretty accurate with how we're going to do this. So we're going to need the right shades for her arm, and the easiest way to do this is by grabbing the eyedropper tool, this tool right here. But we're going to grab it by pressing Alt. So I'm going to get this color right about here, and I'm just going to color in a little patch of her arm. And then when you notice that the shade is starting to look a little bit different, then we can grab a color from maybe over here and then start coloring another little patch. Do the same thing over and over again. Once you notice that shade looking a little bit, you know, just looking a little bit different, then we grab another shade and then we continue on her arm. So yeah, just something like that. Keeping the shades together, basically making sure you're using the right shade on the right part of her arm, but also just kind of fixing up that weird, awkward clipping part. This clipping usually happens quite a bit with hair and clothes, especially if you are an alpha simmer. I'm not sure if it happens much with Maxis clothing, but yeah. So this is what it looks like now that we've brushed over it. It looks great because the awkward part is gone, but it does look a little bit patchy. So we're gonna fix this by using our blur tool. So we're gonna make sure that the patch layer is still selected, and then we're gonna go over right here to this blur tool right here. So we're gonna make sure that the blur tool is fairly big. I usually like to keep it around, I don't know, around 50, 60. Something like that is great. And then we're just going to go ahead and click on it just a few times. We're not going to do it too much, or else it will completely defuse it and just kind of ruin the color altogether, and it'll basically delete the color. So yeah, once you've kind of diffused it to your desired amount, then we can see the difference right here. And yeah, there you go. You've colored in her elbow to make it look a little less awkward. So yeah, then we can click our patch and our sim layer by holding down shift and clicking the sim layer, right clicking, and then merge layers. So this is all one layer now. Now that the area looks all airbrushed and she has no more glitches on her, it's time to do the shadows and highlights. So first, let's go ahead and do the shadows. We're gonna make a brand new layer. And let's name this layer this time. So we're gonna double click on this layer number 3 right here. And then we're gonna name this shadows. And then go ahead, press enter. So that'll be our shadows layer. So we're going to go to the brush tool once again. We can make it a lot bigger this time. Maybe something, let's do, I don't know, something 17, 15, something like this. Something like this would be nice. Let's zoom into her face just a little bit. And we also have to make sure that our foreground color is black. The background color does not matter. Just make sure that the foreground color is black. Okay, so right before we get into our shadows, we need to decide where the light source of the screenshot is going to be. So if you don't have a set background, if you're just using a solid color like I am, then we can make the light source wherever we want. But if you are using the background, you may want to pinpoint where the light source is coming from. But we're just going to do a little bit of a guideline for us just so we can tell where our light source is coming from. So I'm going to make a temporary layer very quickly. New layer, we're going to name this temp because we are deleting this later. I'm just going to make it white, and then we can just kind of draw in a little bit of a light source right there. So the light is going to come down this way, and since the light source is on the top left, then all of the shadows will be casted on the bottom right of her body. So now we can start working on our shadows. So let's go back to this brush tool, make it smaller once again, around 15, something like that, and then we're going to make the color black. So clicking back on our shadow layer, let's start putting in a shadow right under her neck. So the shadow, I'm going to actually make the brush size just a little bit smaller. The shadow on her neck is probably going to look a little bit something like this, since the light source is once again coming in from this way. And then we can just line it in like this. It does not have to be perfect. It does not have to be straight. We're going to be using the blur tool with it anyway. We're going to be diffusing this color by a lot, so don't worry about being too careful with it. It really does not matter. Okay, so after we have the shadow under her neck, then I like to do a shadow under her hair. So usually if the sim has hair that is kind of covering her face, I like to do shadows just to add a little bit of that 3D effect, some depth. So for now, I'm actually going to reduce that brush size once again, and we're going to line the hair. So we're gonna line it like right over here. Gonna do something like this, and then we're also going to do a little bit on this side because the light source is coming on this side. There's not going to be as much shadow, so we're going to do like that. We're going to stop that right there, and we're just going to make the size a little bit smaller and make it kind of just like disappear just a little bit on her eyebrow. So yeah, that is going to be the shadow right on her face. So next, I like to make a shadow right around the clothes, just to add that 3D effect right again. So I like to basically add a shadow right around a sim's neckline. So for her, it's going to be down here because she is wearing a tube top. So let's just add a very rough shadow right in there. I also like to add a shadow where there's any folds or anything like that in the top or the outfit that they're wearing. So I'm going to add one at the bottom right down here. And then she also has a lot of folds and ruffles in the shirt. So I'm going to make the size of the brush a little bit smaller, and then I'm going to go in and follow the guidelines of where these folds are in the clothes and just kind of line it just like that. Alright, so I also like to do around the cleavage part, so there we can use something like this maybe. Something very, very rough. And then we can also add a shadow right where her arm folds over here. So let's add a shadow right here. And let's basically just follow the guidelines of her arm. We can also do a shadow in her collarbone. So something like this. We can make the brush size a little bit bigger now, and then we can kind of fill that in right there. Have like a little circle in her collarbone. Let's make the brush size a little smaller once again. We're always changing the brush sizes, making sure it fits what we're doing. And then we can make a shadow right under her collarbone over here. Oh gosh, it's such a curvy line. I mean, we're gonna diffuse this line anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but okay, there we go. That looks nice. And then also, because she has a choker on, I'm going to do some shadows on the right side of her choker, since once again the light source is coming from this way. Okay, so we lined her choker. Now her choker is looking like a thick mess, but it is totally fine. Now that you've finished the body shadows, you can also add some shadows over here, but I don't normally do that. I'm going to go to her face and add some more shadows on her face now. So let's make this a little bit bigger. Let's make the size just a little bit bigger here. Make it around 10 or something, and we're going to just shadow this nose like so, and then make it kind of go up to the eyelid just a little bit. Let's make this a little smaller, and let's really get into that eyelid. Let's actually not make it that small. Let's make it around 5. Get into the eyelid here. Don't go like on the eyelid, but like right above the eyelid. Really use this line right here as like a guideline of where to stop. Yeah, we're gonna do something like that. That looks good. We're gonna do the same thing on this eyelid over here. Something like that looks pretty good as well. Okay, cool. And then we could go a lot smaller, and we can outline this part of the nose over here for her. Okay, I think we're going to leave this nose part like that. I also like to cast a shadow under the eyelid as well, right in the eyeball. So something like this is really all you need. Something on the inner eyelid right here. Okay, that looks good. That looks good. And then we are also going to do a shadow under her lip, like right here. I also like to do a shadow inside the lips, in the middle of the lips. So I'm going to make the brush a little bit smaller. So that looks pretty good. I'm also going to do in the middle of the Cupid's bow right here. And I think that's looking pretty good so far. The last part that you can do is the contour on the cheek. So something like this is usually the basic outline of a contour if you were to do some makeup on your face. Okay, so now that we have a whole bunch of black markings on her face and body, we can finally blend everything together. So we're going to make sure that the shadow layer is selected right here, the shadows layer, and then we're going to change it from normal to overlay. And then it should look a little bit something like that, depending on the skin tone of your sim. So we're also going to play with the opacity just to turn it down just a little bit, because you don't want to make everything look too dark. So maybe around 15 to 10, or maybe even like 10 to 20, something like that. I don't know. It depends how much you want the shadows to stick out. And then we're going to go back in with that blur tool so we can diffuse the lines. So once again, we're going to make sure that the shadows layer is still selected, and then we can go over places with the blur tool. I recommend leaving the shadows on her body, her eyeball, and around the hair untouched, just because I personally think it looks a little bit better. It looks a little bit more realistic, but do whatever you think looks best for you. So I'm just going to go in here with this blur tool. I'm going to make the size of it a little bit smaller this time, and I'm going to really blur this contour so we can basically blend it all in together. And I'm going to keep this part down here. I'm also going to keep most of her arm, but I'm just going to do maybe just about like half of it, and then it could be like that. Half of it looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm going to leave it like that. And then I'm also going to do this part of her hair right here, but I'm going to leave this this side untouched. So there we go. That's basically the shadows of the sim. Now we can actually get into the highlighting, which is like my favorite part. Okay, so we're going to make a layer again, and then we're going to name this layer highlight. We're going to go back in with that brush tool, and this time we're going to change the foreground color to white. I usually like to start with the under eye right over here. Actually, that's a pretty big size brush. Let's make it a little bit smaller. Okay, so I like to make a whole bunch of just upside down triangles, and I like to go with the highlight that's already on the sim, because most likely if you added some makeup that had a highlight on the sim, just kind of go with it, you know. I also like to highlight the forehead, so I like to make another upside down triangle thing on the forehead. Something about like that shape. Something like that. And then let's make the size a little bit smaller. And then let's highlight the bridge of her nose. Let's highlight the bridge and then the tip. So let's do just a little bit of a circle on the nose like that. And then I like to make another circle on the chin over here like this. Another part that I like to highlight is right here on the lower lip. So just like scratch in like a little highlight here. We're gonna blur this anyway, so it doesn't have to be perfect. And then I like to make this a little bit small. Well, actually, no, we can keep it the same size. We can keep it the size. And I like to just outline the Cupid's bow. And then I also like to do this part of the Cupid's bow as well. So there we go. I think that looks pretty good. We're gonna do the eye sparkles in a little bit, but for now, let's also do some highlight on her collarbone. So we can make this just a little bit bigger, and we could draw a white line right over here, something right over there. We can also scratch in some highlight right on her chest right here. Do something like this over here. You know, we're gonna blend this all in so it doesn't need to look perfect once again, like I will say over and over again. But there, I think that looks pretty good. If you want to highlight anything else on her body, do not be afraid to do so. But this is usually the points that I like to highlight. So once again, we're going to make sure we have that highlight layer selected and go to where it says normal. We're going to change the blending mode to overlay once again, and then we're going to change that opacity down to maybe, I usually like to keep the highlight a little bit more than the shadows. So maybe for this time we can do like 20 or something. And then once again, we will click that blur tool, make it just a little bit bigger, and then we will start diffusing. So for places that I want an even brighter highlight, like the eye sparkle, and just in the corner of the eye right here, I'll make another layer for like a highlight number 2, or you can name it whatever you like. And then we can really go in here, get this brush tool once again, make the brush size pretty small here, and just kind of click in some eye sparkles that we got going on here. I think these make the sim a lot, I don't know, they make the sim stand out a lot more, especially if the sim has a darker eye color. Stuff like the eye sparkle and the little corner of the eye, it just makes a whole bunch difference. So the eye sparkle we're gonna leave, but for the corner of the eye, we're gonna go in with this blur tool. Gonna make the blur tool just a little bit smaller and just go around that just like once maybe. So yeah, I think that looks really good. I think she looks awesome. So I think we're basically done with doing the highlights and the shadows. Okay, so after we have completed basically all of the highlights and shadows, I like to add some texture to the sim. So make sure you select the sim layer right down here. We're going to go to filter, and then we're going to click noise, add noise. Usually either 1 or 2 works. I think even 2 is a little too much though, but it depends how much texture you want to add to the sim. Okay, so after we placed in the noise on the sim, I deleted that temp layer, by the way, because we do not need that layer any longer. We already placed all of our shadows and highlights and such. But now I want to play around with light leaks. So I have this one light leak pack that I literally always use for every single one of my Sims screenshots. I got it from Lana CC Finds. But it is this light leak pack right here. It comes with a whole bunch of light leaks, and I think it looks amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and use this light leak right here. I'm going to just fit this to the screen. And I just love the way this looks. Honestly, this light leak is amazing. We're going to change the blending mode to screen. And there we go. There is our light leak. So after this light leak, I like to play around with these filters on Photoshop down here. So on this little bar right below the layers is this like circle thing. And the first thing that I like to do is play with gradient map. So I'm going to select this black to white gradient right here. And then we're going to change the blending mode of it to hard light. I think it just adds a lot more contrast to it. It makes it look a lot more almost realistic, to be honest. I think that it makes it look really good. After this, I like to play around with the photo filter, and because this is a warmer color, because we have this yellow background, I'm going to choose the warming filter, but you can also just like literally scroll through it, see how you like everything. But yeah, I think I'm going to stick around with the warming filter. You can also turn the density up and down. So next, I also like to play with the vibrance. This basically changes the saturation, makes the saturation a little more intense, makes the photo like literally more vibrant. So I think that looks nice. The final thing that I like to do is play with the brightness and the contrast. I think if we turn this up a lot, it looks really good. Honestly, I really like it turned up. Even though you can't see the yellow as much in the background, I think it looks really, really nice. And then we can change the contrast. We could turn the contrast all the way down, turn it up, make it a little more intense. Like, this is an intense photo going on right now. I think it looks really good. The last final touch that I want to add to the screenshot is just a little bit of a frame to just end everything off. So once we've clicked the rectangle tool over here, we're going to actually set this fill to none. And then we're going to set the stroke to white. And the stroke thing that I have is 3. The stroke thing. And then we're just going to make a frame right here, just to basically end everything off right there. So I think that looks really, really good. I think this is a really beautiful screenshot. Obviously, if you want to add a background, if you want to add sparkles, if you want to add anything else, you can go ahead and do so. But with a mouse and keyboard, I think the screenshot looks amazing, just as amazing as my other screenshots look on my tablet. Alright, so anyway guys, I think we are pretty much done with the Sims screenshot. Obviously these were just some tips. You don't have to follow these tips for every single screenshot that you use, but these are just the tips that I've used to help me. So if you followed along, don't be afraid to add your own twist to the screenshots and send me what you made on Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, anything. I would love to see your creations. I would love to see if you actually followed along with what I was doing, and I would love to see what she looks like in your computer. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time. Bye!